अखण्डमण्डलाकारं व्याप्तं येन चराचरं तत्पदं दर्शितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। Modern physics and Indian philosophy has some things in common. So I am not saying this. This is the perception and the feeling and the conclusion of the great scientists of the globe, including Einstein. Let me start with the comparison between Adi Shankara and modern physics. Adi Shankara says that this world is Maya, an illusion. Quantum physics says that the world we see and perceive are not real. They are just 3D projections of the mind. About Adi Shankara says that Brahma Satya Jagan Mithya. Only the Brahman is the absolute reality, and physics says that only that consciousness is reality. Shankaracharya says that Brahmanda is created and dissolved again into Parabrahman. Physics says atoms bind together to make planets, stars, comets, and at some time later they disintegrate and merge with the consciousness. See what we say in the Pitika Bhaga of Vishnu Sahasranamam. Yatas sarvani bhutani bhavantyadi yugagame yasmimscha pralayam yanti punareva yugakshaye. Yes, see, all the things will emerge from Parabrahman at the beginning of the universe, at the creation, and all the things will merge in dissolved again into Parabrahman at a time of deluge. So the atoms bind together to make planets, stars, comets, and at some time later, so this is the creation, yatas sarvani bhutani bhavantyadi yugagame, and at time later they disintegrate and merge with the consciousness, that is yasminscha pralayam yanti punareva yugakshaye. And Shankara's view is that Jivatma is nothing but a separated soul from Brahman and has to strive to merge with Brahman called moksha. Physics' view is that everyone was once part of the consciousness, later separated, and has to merge back to that consciousness. Shankara's opinion about Jivatma realized then it is state of nirvana, the jiva beyond time, space, and mind. So physics view is that when someone deeply understands that consciousness, then there is no time, no space, and no mind. Jivatma feels he is real because of the presence of mind, is Adi Shankara's words. Quantum physics says that individuality is an illusion that is caused by mind. Brahman cannot be realized through senses because they are limited, is Adi Shankara's words. Infinity cannot be understood with finite media, is the physics view. Brahman cannot be, yes. We are all one consciousness experiencing differently, subjectively, because of different karma. There is no such thing as death. Life is just a dream. We are eternal beings. The reality, as you know, does not exist. See, we can uh, uh, recall this mantra, Shrunvantu Sarve Amrutasya Putraha. That is, there is no such a thing as death because we are all the sons of Amrita where there is no death. And what the entire physicists have, quantum physicists have understood is just a part of Advaita philosophy of Adi Shankaracharya, which is purely derived from the Vedas. There exists none greater a scientist than Adi Shankaracharya. They say about this is the opinion of the modern physicists. The unchanging reality, the reality which does not change, is called God by common people, called consciousness by scientists, and called energy by believers. Ekam Sat Vipra Bahuda Vadanti. There is only one thing that exists. They call him by different names, says Rigveda. The same thing is expressed here. The unchanging reality, that is the permanent reality, is called God by common people like us, consciousness by scientists, and it is called as energy by believers, but they all call the same entity by different names. We are all the same consciousness but appear differently because of our own actions. With a single line started by Shankara, Brahma Satya Jagat Mithya, Jivo Brahmaiva na aparaha. He says Brahman is the only reality. The living entity is not different from Brahman that has revealed the innermost knowledge. So the physicists are also coming towards this. See, we says that there is no space, there is no time when we go beyond Jiva. So space and time superimposed upon space-time. They call it a superimposement. A Shankaracharya call it as adhyasa. Adhyasa is called as superimposement in superimposition in science. Space and time superimposed. That is the prescience of these remarks. Just a minute. So, Wheel's observation on the significance of the epistemological situation developed in the post-reality physics are quite enlightening. He says that objective world we want as a substratum under our immediate perceptions is only a symbolical construction. See, the objective world, what we see around us, is just a symbol. At least human knowledge is unable to present it in a different form. One may admit that only in the theory of relativity has science fully realized the fact that space and time as we know them from intuition are to be discarded as a basis of construction. The educated people of today have become thoroughly familiar with the idea that the sense qualities do not show up as such in physics, but are replaced by motions in space and time, by sound or ether waves, oscillation of strings of electron or electric currents. But the man on the street has not yet grasped this necessity of relinquishing even space and time. He can't avoid picturing those physical occurrences to himself as intuitive motions in intuitive space. This is the chief impediment of prevents the layman from a thoroughgoing understanding of the relativity theory. This is from the book Mind and Nature. Will's confession in the above quotation that human knowledge is unable to represent the objective realm, or what called the substratum or adhisthana in Vedanta, under our immediate perceptions, except by way of symbolical construction, is what has prompted him to term scientific knowledge as a mystifying intellectual screen erected between reality and ourselves. So this is called as Maya by Adi Shankara. Such a concept of objective relativity occasions may question on the subject-object relationship. First of all, if the objective reality about what we see as the world is something very abstract, devoid of all sensory qualities, and representable only symbolically, as the scientist has shown, where have we the qualities such as color, shape, or form, etc. come from and gathered upon the objects which we feel we actually see around us? See, we see different shapes. Triangular shape we see a spherical shape, we see a rectangular shape, we see different colors. So how, from where does these colors come from? And how can we feel, say this object is of this shape, or this object is of this color, this is white, this is black, this is yellow? How can we know that? If these qualities are not in the object, are they the contributions of the subject, which we, however, wrongly attribute to the object? So, if these qualities are not in the object, then are they the contributions of the subject, which we, however, wrongly attribute to the object? If the subject is to see in the object what is not really there, what is the nature of the subject itself? So this is a very interesting question. And see, in the object there is nothing. According to the concept of objective reality, there is nothing in the object. But who is this subject and what complexities are involved in its structure that is so successfully creates and sets up before itself the illusory spectacle of a colorful variety and diversity? Finally, how should we construe the relationship between the subject and the object in the life of problems raised above? So, what is the notion of subjectivity in physics? Let us know that first. Questions such as these may take us far beyond the limits of scientific epistemology, which is confined to the problems arising within the scope of a physical science. See, the philosophic character which modern science has assumed after it has evolved the theory of relativity, and quantum mechanics has elevated into a position form from where it can look into certain problems which have been regarded till now as belonging only to the province of pure philosophy. They thought that these questions were subjected or were confined to philosophy alone. Besides merely knowing things and noticing their differences and similarities, we have to comprehend them and discern their meaning and significance in relation to ourselves. So beyond the knowledge gained from the individual sciences, remarks we. See, this is the knowledge beyond our senses. See, we can see or we can understand what we know. We can understand English. We think that we can understand English. We can understand Sanskrit. We can understand philosophy. And we can understand science. We can comprehend that. But they say that Wheel remarks that beyond the knowledge gained from the individual sciences, there remains the task of comprehending. So the task of comprehending is still remaining. We have not understood the nature properly. We have understood only a part of it, he says. So the theory of relativity is we understand a physical illustration of the idea of subjectivity as expressed in the correlative variance of the subject and object. The fact that all spatial and temporal measurements made by an observer are true only in relation to his frame reference, that is upadhi. See, for example, I say that I have a phone which is 6.5 inches long and 2.5 or 3 inch wide. So this is confined to only this. So the theory of physical illustration of the we are to convert knowledge in beyond the knowledge remarks. There remains the task of comprehending, in spite of the fact that so what is Einstein's theory of relativity says? It says that wide range theory of what is a theory of relativity? Wide-ranging physical theories formed by German-born physicist Albert Einstein, along with quantum mechanics. Relativity is central to modern physics. In particular, relativity provides the basis for understanding cosmic process and the geometry of the universe itself. In general, relativity, also known as the general theory of relativity, is the geometric theory of gravitation published by Albert Einstein in 1915 and is the current description of gravitation in modern physics. So Einstein's relativity theory as a physical theory and Shankaracharya's Adhyasa theory as a psychophysical theory illustrate the same principle in the phenomenon of our world perception. Shankara takes up the commonly held notions of Jiva, Jagat and Ishvara, the basic contents of the religious creeds and philosophies of Vedic tradition, and transforms them into a single of absolute reality by showing them to the notions rooted in the self-deluded individualism of Jiva. So, Adi Shankara takes the notion of Jiva, Jagat, that is the world around us, and Ishvara, that is Parabrahman, or the supreme of this universe, are the basic contents of the religious creeds and philosophies of Vedic tradition, and transforms them into a single of absolute reality by showing them to be the notions rooted in the self-deluded individualism of Jiva. So this is present in each and every Jiva or soul, the individual soul. He explains Shankara of the nature of adhyasa and relativity, that is sapekshata, the primary form of which consists in the error of seeing the self as the non-self, that is, I say that I am talking. So here, what is that I hear? There are two things here. One is non-eternal and another is eternal. So if I take that I to be my body, so my talking will stop as soon as my breath is stopped. But that is not in the case of I. So here, the self Atman as the non-self Anatman. We think that this is the error that we do, he says. In their functional role, Atma and Anatma, between which there prevails a mutual superimposition or adhyasa, are the same as the subject and object, or the observer and the observed. See, here the subject and object are the same. Observer and observed are the same. So, just as it is impossible in physics to gather empirical knowledge about the universe without specifying frame of reference, so also it is impossible for Jiva to initiate the knowing processes until it is identified with some material upadhi or frame of reference like the intellect, mind, or the physical body, that is buddhi, manas, or deha. That is why here even the panchakoshas of our body are compared with this theory of relativity. This act of coordination of the observer or knower is what defines them in both the Vedantic and scientific theories. See, the Vedantic and scientific theories has a common thing in the case of perception, that is, even without a frame of specifying a frame of reference, the empirical knowledge cannot be gained in the physics, that is about the universe. So, at this time or at this juncture of time, for example, we say that Einstein published his theory in the year 1915 CE, Christian era. So there is a frame of time, frame of reference. So also, it is impossible for the Jiva to initiate the process of knowledge until it identified with some material upadhi or frame of reference. Both Jiva and physics want a material reference for having the knowledge. This act of coordination of the observer or knower is what defines them in both the Vedantic and scientific theories. Technically saying, such an observer or Jiva who is in a state of superimposition, adhyasa, is called as pramatru. So the formulation of concept of pramatru, which means one who knows through pramanas or senses, entails a simultaneous projection of pramana and prameya, senses and sense of objects, the last of these making up the objective world of space and time. The meeting point between Einstein's theory of relativity and Shankara's theory of adhyasa is the concept of the observer, which is defined in relativity theory by some notional space-time coordinates like here, now, the light cone, and in Shankara's theory as pramatru or an embodied consciousness. The here now is the four-dimensional space-time diagram, is a translation of the epistemological Sanskrit term pramatru into the space-time language of physics. So both of these concepts, the observer defined by a here now and the observer defined by a physical body and senses, are the products of what Shankara calls as superimposition or adhyasa. Any here now point is equal to every other point, and there is no objectivity, tangible property that holds for one and does not hold for the other. Therefore, the ideal of objectivity, as far as space and time are concerned, is attained in this definition. The ideal of objectivity, as far as space and time are concerned, it is attained in this definition, but the marking of such points is necessitated by the fact of the consciousness, the most essential element in the complex concept of the observer, to which we must finally appeal in every act of perception or observation in the embodied entity. The observer is consciousness plus a physical body. Here, the observer is the consciousness plus a physical body. The latter's extensive always being marked by here, space, and now at time. Thus, the concept of observer is fixing its special location here and in identifying its existence with some temporal point now, partakes of both the space-time character of the object and the psycho-physical character of the subject. Model and source of every demonstrative act in the little word I. Thus, the problem of relativity observes wheel reveals a new specific side of the subject-object relation. So what is this new specific side of the subject-object relation really? Relativity relations are not casual, but superimpositional, and the superimposition is mutual between the subject and object. That is, the adhyasa is mutual between the observer and the observed, or the subject and the object. Wheel again quotes that the objective world merely exists, it does not happen. As a whole, it has no history. Only before the eye of consciousness climbing up in the world line of my body, a section of this world comes to life and moves past it as a spatial image engaged in temporal transformation. This splitting up of the world into space and time at some moment for some consciousness expresses itself in the following world geometric construction. The roots of physicist's observer, whether defined by here now or by a set of certain coordinates, are thus ultimately buried in the psychophysical mechanism of perception in man, which again in turn takes its genesis from his ego, that the false sense of distinctive individuality is in an otherwise integrated universe of interconnections. Behind the pointer readings and frames of reference in such objectivity drama of the physicist, there operates silently the little ego I, giving directions to the experimentation and determining the very nature of all his knowledge. So, consciousness, the final seat of appeal in scientific observation. So, the concept of says, the concept of observer, Pramatru in Vedanta, holds the key to our understanding of the theory of, in the relativity theory. The physicist can hold on firmly on his position of objectivity. But in the principle, one must hold to the position that nothing of intuitive contents and essence of these terms enters into the systematic symbolical construction of the physical world. Reality to be determined by all possible states of an observer, says Shankara's Sarvatrika Anubhava. So he says that we should see everything in us and us in everything. This is called as Sarvatrika Anubhava. We are able to calculate certain consequences and anticipate certain facts because of this correspondence. The causal chain binds the past events with their present consequences and the present consequences with their future effects. There is certain concordance between nature and our mind, without which we should rule out the very possibility of any knowledge. So, some salient points in the above discussion on the observation There is an objective world which can only be symbolically constructed by the physicists, but not given to our experience. Science concedes to idealism that its objective world is not given, but only propounded like a problem to be solved, and it can be constructed by only by symbols. So this is from Vedanta and Modern Physics of Dr. U. Chandrasekharaya. I am quoting. What is given in our experience as the data of the consciousness is not the objectivity of the existing world. That corresponds does not hold between the one real world and the actual perception of the observer. There is a definite connection between the symbolical or objective world of science and the data of our consciousness. The relativity theory has shown that different observers take different views of one and the same reality, which is uniquely determined in the objective sense. Therefore, what we ever come to know is a relative truth. The absolute substratum of this phenomenal appearance always remaining as transcendental reality. In scientifically appropriate language, we say the object is transcendental while the phenomenon is in appearance. The real nature of the object is never known to the science except by the way of its representation in symbol. So, Erwin Schrödinger puts that the Upanishads say that the observer and the observed are the same things. In his book 1944, What is Life?, Schrödinger took on a particular line of thought. If the world is indeed created by our act of observation, there should be billions of such worlds, one for each of us. This is the doctrine of the Upanishads. The multiplicity is only apparent. This is the doctrine of Upanishads and not of the Upanishads only. The mystical experience of the union with God regularly leads to this view unless strong prejudice stand in the way. Erwin Schrödinger's quotes about Upanishads. He said that as Upanishads say that Atman is one, so the reality is one also, he accepts that. Significantly, in formulating the doctrine of the higher reality, Hermann Weyl almost repeats Adi Shankaracharya. The structure of our scientific cognition of the world is decisively determined by the fact that this world does not exist in itself, but is merely encountered by us as an object in the correlative variance of the subject and object. The world exists only as that met with an ego as the one appearing to a consciousness. The consciousness is the function. In this function does not belong to the world, but stands out against the being as the sphere of vision, of meaning, of image, or however else one may call it. Mind and Nature by Hermann Weyl. See, some of the common features that we can find between Hermann Wheel and Adi Shankara in perceiving the world. The structure of our scientific cognition of the world is decisively determined by the fact. Is Hermann Wheel's words, Adi Shankara says, Loka Vyavaharaha Pramana Prameya Vyavaharaha. This world does not exist in itself, but is merely encountered by us as an object. Is Wheel's opinion, Dehendriyadishu aham mamabhimana rahitasya pramatrattvanupapattau pramana pravrutti anupapattehe nacha anadhyastatma bhavena dehena kaschit vyapriyate. In the correlative variance of subject and object, Yushmad Asmat Pratyaya Gocharayoho Vishaya Vishayinoho. The world exists only as that met with by an ego, I am the living I. Anyonyasmin, Anyonyatmakatam, Anyonya dharmamscha adhyasya ahamidam mamedam asmat pratyaya gochare vishayini yushmat pratyaya gocharasya vishayasya tad dharmanam cha adhyasaha. As the one appearing to a consciousness, vishayi, the consciousness in this function does not belong to the world. Atyanta viviktayoho dharma dharminoho tamaprakasha viddha ruddha swabhavayoho itaretara bhavanupapattau siddhayam tad dharmanamapi sutaram itaretara bhavanupattihi ityataha, but stands out against that being sat, as the sphere of vision, of meaning, of image, or however else one may call it, Chita. See, Hermann Wheel from his mind and nature, and the quotes from Adhyasa Bhashya of Shankara. And relativity and theory, Adhyasa theory, are epistemologically non-different. So they are one and the same. The scientists are telling. Between the observer and the observed, or the subject and the object, there takes a place of mutual superimposition of characteristics, that is Adhyasa, main contention of Shankara's theory of Adhyasa. To illustrate, cognition belongs to the Atman, but the mode of cognition is determined by the instrument of perception. Therefore, the expression, which is only typical and not unique, signifies the superimposed state which constitutes the observer. In the concept of the observer, there is an inevitable mingling of the Atman and Anatman. In observer, both Atman and Anatman, that is, both Atman and the non-living and living things, both are there. That is, I and not I. The not I, or the I, the sense of perception in this case, actually belongs to the objective side of things, and yet we are accustomed to regard the act of observation as solely belonging to the subject, the I. So the resulting error of such an assumption is that what we consider as objective knowledge is not really so. So what we consider as the objective knowledge is not the real knowledge. Since we fail to isolate the objective element, which gets mixed up with the concept of the subject in the act of perception. So If we see, we are seeing a tree. So we are hearing, we are listening to a lecture. We are hearing a sound, or we are experiencing a touch, which may give us pleasure or which may give us sorrow, which may lead us to sorrow. So these are all get mixed up. See, these are all the activities of the body. Sense organs are in the body, and they are their action is to see or to hear or to feel, touch or touch another object or anything. But when the body is not there, when all the metabolism of the body is stopped, all these things that are pertaining to body, that is talking or listening or respiring or seeing or touching, everything will go. And because of this, both are get mixed up. That is, the living and non-living things are get mixed up here. In every act of perception, the situation is that we look at one part of the object through another part of it, and the object in itself is never given to our experience. So, in here, I is an amalgam of the subject and object. I realize myself as a seer, as a hearer, as a doer, as an enjoyer, as an ego in my encounter with the world. So, but this relation presupposes the misidentification of the subject with the object. So there will be a misidentification of the subject with the object. And what we realize as the world and its correlative I, the ego, as Hermann Wheel has already pointed out, exists only in the meeting of the subject and the object. Only in this meeting of consciousness and being both exists the world and I. Observation is a complex act which does not present in the reality as it is, but puts it before me as the result of the subject-object interaction. There will be an interaction between the subject and the object. So that is, the subject is I, for example, subject is Gayatri, and the object is the tree. So Gayatri is seeing the object. This is an interaction. In the ultimate analysis is not the causal type, and Shankara has therefore termed it as superimposition, that is adhyasa. So, let us know some more think of adhyasa in the next session. Thank you for patience hearing. Thank you.